When the Strait of Hormuz closed in early March 2026, the entire world focused on one thing: oil. Brent crude surged past $120 a barrel. Gas stations across America crossed the $4 mark. News anchors repeated the same number over and over. 20% of the world's oil supply passes through that narrow corridor between Iran and Oman. But oil is not the only thing stuck behind that strait. And the items nobody is talking about may end up costing you more than the fuel in your tank. I have been tracking the downstream economic data since the closure began, and what I keep finding are disruptions that have nothing to do with crude prices, but everything to do with your grocery bill, your hospital visit, and the car you were planning to buy this year. Here are 9 things trapped behind the Strait of Hormuz that nobody is paying attention to. Number 1, fertilizer. This is the one that should concern you the most. Roughly 1/3 of all internationally traded fertilizer normally transits the Strait of Hormuz. The Gulf states are among the world's largest exporters of nitrogen-based fertilizers, particularly urea, which is the most widely used fertilizer on Earth. Since the closure, urea prices at the New Orleans hub have jumped from $475 per metric ton to $680 per metric ton. That is a 43% increase in 5 weeks. And the timing could not be worse. This is happening right in the middle of the spring planting window for corn and soybeans across the American Midwest. Farmers who cannot afford inputs at these prices will either plant less or absorb costs that get passed directly to consumers. You will not see this on your receipt for another 3 to 5 months, but it is already locked in. Number 2, sulfur. Most people have never thought about sulfur as a strategic commodity, but nearly half of all global seaborne sulfur trade passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Sulfur is a byproduct of oil and gas refining, and the Gulf produces enormous quantities of it. Here is why it matters. Sulfuric acid is the key product made from sulfur, and sulfuric acid is required for 2 things that define the modern economy. The first is phosphate fertilizers, which keep global agriculture functioning. The second is the chemical process used to refine nickel, cobalt, and copper for electric vehicle batteries. Without sulfur, you cannot make the fertilizer that grows your food or the batteries that power the next generation of cars. Industrial operations in Indonesia and across the African copper belt are already slowing down because they cannot source enough of it. Number 3, methanol. About 1/3 of global seaborne methanol trade transits the strait. Methanol is a chemical building block for resins, coatings, adhesives, and plastics. China is the world's largest methanol buyer, and its port inventories are projected to fall below warning thresholds if Gulf exports remain curtailed. When methanol supply tightens, the cost of producing plastics, paints, synthetic fabrics, and packaging materials rises across Asia and eventually reaches consumers worldwide. Number 4, aluminum. The United Arab Emirates is one of the world's largest aluminum exporters, and those shipments normally pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Aluminum is in everything: beverage cans, aircraft fuselages, construction framing, electronics housings, and automobile body panels. Any sustained disruption to aluminum supply from the Gulf translates directly into higher manufacturing costs for dozens of industries that most people never associate with the Middle East. Number 5, synthetic graphite. This one is hidden inside a supply chain most people do not know exists. The synthetic graphite used in the electric vehicle battery anodes is manufactured from petroleum coke, a byproduct of oil refining. When oil prices surge, refineries shift operations to maximize production of higher value fuels, and that reduces the output of petroleum coke. Less petroleum coke means less synthetic graphite. Less synthetic graphite means higher battery costs. Higher battery costs mean the electric vehicles you were expecting to get cheaper this year may actually become more expensive. The green energy transition just collided with the oldest choke point in geopolitics. Number 6. Helium. Qatar is one of the largest helium suppliers on the planet. Helium is not just for party balloons. It is used to cool MRI machines in hospitals, to manufacture semiconductors, and as a component in rocket propulsion systems. There is no synthetic substitute for helium. When the supply from Qatar is disrupted, hospitals face equipment maintenance delays, chip fabrication facilities slow their output, and aerospace programs adjust their timelines. This is a bottleneck with no workaround. Number 7. Jet fuel. 30% of Europe's jet fuel supply originates from or transits through the Strait of Hormuz. Airlines operating routes between Europe, Asia, and Africa are already dealing with higher fuel costs and forced rerouting of flights around the conflict zone. The Gulf is within an 8-hour flight of 2/3 of the world's population. When the airspace around it becomes contested and fuel costs spike simultaneously, the price of every international flight touching that region increases. Ticket prices for routes between Europe and Asia have already begun climbing, and business travel budgets across both continents are being revised. Number 8. Liquefied natural gas. Europe sources 12 to 14% of its liquefied natural gas from Qatar, and all of it passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Parts of Qatar's massive LNG production facility have sustained missile damage that the operator warned could take up to 5 years to fully repair. Japan receives 70% of its Middle Eastern oil through the Strait of Hormuz, and it depends heavily on Gulf liquefied natural gas for electricity generation. South Korea and India face similar exposure. Asia's energy security was built on the assumption that this corridor would always remain open. That assumption is now broken. Number 9. The container cascade. This is the disruption you will not see coming until it arrives all at once. When major shipping lines reroute vessels around the Cape of Good Hope to avoid the Strait of Hormuz, the initial impact takes 10 to 14 days to show up, but the real damage hits 2 to 5 weeks later when rerouted containers arrive at ports in clusters. Terminal congestion spikes, trucking and chassis availability falls behind demand. Shippers face demurrage charges for cargo sitting too long at port. Empty containers that would normally be repositioned for export get stranded on the wrong side of the world. This tightens export capacity in markets as far away as North America. The container cascade from the Strait of Hormuz closure has not fully arrived yet. When it does, it will compound every other disruption on this list. What connects all 9 of these is a single structural failure. The global economy was designed around the assumption that the Strait of Hormuz would never close for more than a few days. Shipping insurers price their models on that assumption. Manufacturers built supply chains on that assumption. Governments wrote energy security strategies on that assumption. And now, more than 5 weeks into the largest maritime supply disruption since the 1970s, that assumption has been proven wrong. The oil story will dominate the headlines because oil prices are visible and immediate, but fertilizer prices take months to reach the grocery store. Sulfur shortages take quarters to stall battery production lines. Container cascades take weeks to paralyze port operations. These are slow-moving disruptions, and by the time most people feel them, the connection to a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman will be invisible. That is what Guy Alencian is here to trace. The economic forces behind the headlines that most people never see until the bill arrives. If this analysis was useful to you, subscribe. I will see you in the next one.